Hi, I'm Paweł Spychalski and this is another video in the ESC series about the Demag Compensation and the BL Heli because you requested me covering this topic. But before we will proceed, I would like to thank all my Patreon and YouTube supporters for their backing. If you are not one of them, please consider becoming one and help me create this kind of the content. But now, let's go back to the ESCs. There is very little information, and when I say very little, I do mean very little about the settings and what they do when you change them in the BL Heli configurator. Yes, there is this kind of the public knowledge that, okay, increase the timing and increase the Demag compensation. Great. There is also the official manual from the BL Heli 32, which has like 5 sentences about almost everything and does not really explains too much. And there is what post blog from Philipp Seidel by This is in German and a series of video from Joshua Bardwell. So I don't think this is really enough, so let me put my thoughts and knowledge into the mix. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the video today, let's talk about the Demag compensation. By the way, previously we also talked about the motor timing, the link in the description, and also generally how the ESC is really working. And in the future there will be a few more. I only have to shoot those videos. So let's go to the whiteboard. The BL Heli Demag compensation is directly connected with the desinks and Back-EMF and zero crossing detection that ESC has to perform to rotate the motor. So, short introduction. I have a longer video on the topic. This one will be really short. We have a coil, one of the coils inside of the stators, and we have the wires connected to it, which are parts of one of the phases. On top of that, on the rotor of the motor, we have a magnet that is just rotating like that around the coils, and ESC, to be able to spin the motor correctly, it has to detect when it should start energizing the coil, so that the coil, the phase, generates magnetic fields and pulls the magnet towards it, and to stop doing that. This is called the zero crossing. When the magnet is moving in this direction, right now the coil should be energized, should generate magnetic field and pull the magnet to itself, but when it comes to this point it should be released because the magnet should continue. If the coil would not stop being energized, then well, it would pull the magnet this direction and kinda like break the whole flow. So it just has to know when to start putting the voltage, in the power into the coil, and when to stop doing that. This is done, like this is the process, like I said, is zero crossing detection, and it's done thanks to the Back-EMF detection. Because not only when the current goes through the inductor, the coil, it generates magnetic fields, but also moving magnetic fields generates the voltage, the electricity inside of the coil. So by observing how the voltage generated by the magnets is measured by the ESC is able to predict when the next zero crossing will happen, on which phase, and which phase should be energized in which time period. Of course, but this is a prediction because the coil should be energized before the zero crossing happens. So ESC predicts that the next moment when it should start will be then, or then, or then, or then. Sometimes, however, ESC is wrong. And the reasons why the ESC is wrong and it's putting power through the phases too early or too late can be different. First of all, it's not a perfect process, and even the extra electric noise somewhere there can just like mess everything up. Or that the fact that every time you hear inductance and alternating current, you should know that it's a fucked up situation, and that the current does not follow voltage, it's lagging by 90 degrees, and that means when you even apply the voltage, the current and the magnetic field will have to slowly grow because the impedance inductance is acting as inertia, and when you cut off the voltage, also the current will only slowly go down. So we don't like that. We don't like that, but it also means that even if the energization, the process of generating the magnetic field takes time, and the process of stopping the magnetic field inside of the coil takes some time. And those imperfections and just noise, electrical going left and right, torques, voltage spikes, this all can make ESC to fail to predict the correct moments when it should put power through the coil and stop putting power to the coil. When this happened, we usually go into the desync situation when just the motor stutters or even stops in the rotation. Usually when you increase the power. And the moment when you increase the power, if your ESC and the motor stutters when you immediately increase the power just because you apply the throttle on, apply the fast rotation or either axis, this is where the Demag compensation can help you. Not only, but this is the most obvious moment when the desyncs are happening. When you rapidly increase the power, demand more rotation speed from the ESC, because then we have acceleration, so it's simpler for the ESC just to go nuts. What Demag compensation does? First of all, it detects the desync, detects that the ESC might have missed the correct moment. When it does it, it can do two things. Thing number one is to ignore the current estimation of the RPM of the motor required to predict when the next energization of the coil should happen, and just stay with the previously computed value, because probably what we computed right now is just so much off that trusting the current wrong situation will even make things worse. So it just stays with the previously computed RPM and prediction of the phases, and also can slightly reduce power. This power reduction is driven by the Demag compensation setting inside of the ESC BL-Heli 32. When it's off, then there is no power reduction. When it's low or high, then it's either the power is cut slightly or slightly more. But remember, this is only in the situation when ESC thinks that the desync is happening or might be happening in the future, because we are missing the correct commutation, correct zero crossing, correct commutation, and it just should act. What we get from the lowering of the power on the coil? Well, because usually desyncs are happening during acceleration, we slightly reduce the acceleration so that we increase the chances of the previous estimation of the RPM and zero crossing for the next phase is correct, because we are not accelerating by the basically unknown factor. We just try to keep up with what's happening right now, hoping that slower acceleration will make the process of estimation more reliable. So this is what you really should be doing. If you are not facing any kind of the desyncs in flight, when you just move the throttle how fast you want and the motors are just working fine without any problems, nor desyncs, nor stutter, then leave the Demag compensation how it is by default. Don't touch it. If, however, you're having this moment that, especially on the low kV and the bigger motors, that you open the throttle rapidly and you hear, because you even hear that something wrong is happening, then increase the Demag compensation value. The lowering of the power during the acceleration of the motor will help ESC to correctly predict the correct moments when it should be turning off and on. Setting low, like I said before, limits the power slightly. Setting high limits power slightly more. It does not mean that total power of your motor will be reduced. No, ESC will make the adjustment for the power that goes into the coil only when it will detect the desync or future desync. When you are just rotating or moving this slower and there is no danger of a desync, the power will not be reduced. So you have a choice. You can have all the power that you cannot use, because when you apply the full power you go into a desync and the quad falls. Somehow not really what you want to do. Or allow ESC to reduce the power during the acceleration when the desync might be happening. The choice is yours. I personally rather would choose the second option, when the ESC knows better what's happening, and I prefer to keep the control of the quad. So, final notice. If everything is working, don't touch anything. If, however, you are experiencing desyncs, increase the Demag compensation slightly from off to low or from low to high, to give ESC a better protection against the desyncs caused by the physics. Because one of the reasons this is happening is that when you turn off the coil, it doesn't mean that the magnetic field is off immediately, because the voltage is behind current, because there is the inductance and the phase shift of the current comparing to the voltage, and B, this is physics, and C, when the magnetic field is there and then it's interacting with the magnetic field of the magnet. So physics, electrics, you can read on the Wikipedia about that. I will not bother you with those kind of problems. I hope this helps. And that's all about the Demag compensation. If you would like to know more about how ESC work and just basically how the science around the RC hobby drones, FPV airplanes works, and then I really do suggest that you subscribe to the channel, because the Yes Science series is kind of popular right now, and I really do think that it makes sense to record more and more videos about that. Besides that, yeah, I think the regular stuff, please consider becoming my patron on Patreon. There are a few useful links in the description. There is a link to a secret, but not really secret, Discord channel. And thank you for watching. Until the next one. Bye bye.